What encouraged you to share the dances with us from the third graders?
Awesome. So I really enjoyed learning how to Devka when I studied abroad in Jordan. There's a desert area called Wadi Rum where Bedouin people live, and there's not really any internet connection or like nobody's bringing out a speaker to play music, but everyone's just playing on traditional instruments and drums. And the main thing to do in the evening is to dance to the Devka. So I thought it was something that everybody could get up, be active, and do with one another. And like you all said, line dances and group dances bring people together so that everyone can participate and celebrate their culture. So I wanted you all to be able to participate in that too because I enjoyed it a lot when I was in Jordan.
Yeah, and kind of the same thing also. I didn't go to Ethiopia until I was 13 years old, but my whole life leading up to that, all I knew were the dances and I knew some of the language. So for me, this was a way to kind of interact with the culture. And when I went there, they were actually really surprised that I knew how to dance. So that was really fun. And that's kind of why I wanted to share that with y'all. Even though you may not be able to go visit these countries at the moment, you can also kind of learn from them through dance.
And do you have a favorite Ethiopian piece of music or style of music? If so, what is it called? And maybe sing too if you have any favorite music from Jordan.
I like the Gondar dances, Gonder. It's a specific region in Ethiopia, and their dances, they do the iskasta, but it's faster and it's a little more intense, and I like to dance really fast. So I like to listen to those and dance along. So y'all should listen to that when you have free time.
So my answer, it's not necessarily Jordanian music that's my favorite, but out of Arab music, there's this one band called the Harmony Band, and they sing basically praises to the Prophet Muhammad, and they do it in like a pop and rap style too. So in some countries, like you're not really supposed to do that. It's just supposed to be a very traditional style of saying these verses from the Islamic holy book, the Quran, but instead this like new band called the Harmony Band actually raps to it, and it's a group of women and men together really worshiping with one another. And I think it's really cool because it's a modern version of such a historic tradition, and it's one that you can actually find online called the Harmony Band.
They would like to know if people in Jordan eat spaghetti and what's your favorite food from Jordan, and maybe the same for you, Hannah, if you're some of your favorite Ethiopian dishes.
Yeah, so, well, people in Jordan do eat spaghetti. However, it is not as common as other dishes that are native to the area. But there are people who are Americans, Western people, Italian too, that will travel to Jordan, and there are restaurants with those themes. So, of course, spaghetti is served there. However, my favorite dish from Jordan is actually the national dish, and it's called mansef. So it's Mansef. And it's a dish that at the bottom layer, well, Jordanian food tends to be served so that everyone can share it. So it's a huge plate. And at the bottom layer, there's this thin bread. On top of that, there's yellow rice, and it also has like nuts in it as well. However, if you're allergic, you don't have to put the nuts in there. And on top, there's a lamb. And the lamb tends to be the most common meat in Jordan. Nobody really eats cow. Cows aren't very common, so the beef is normally lamb. And then there's also this like milky sauce that's poured on top of it. And it's a huge plate. And if you're a guest in someone's home in Jordan, then you have to eat the most. So as long as your hosts are still eating, like you should still be eating.
Yeah.
So for me, when I first tried mansef, it was at a friend's family's home. We're all sitting on the ground, eating the food, sharing stories, making connections. So for me, that's my favorite dish because it's one that brings people together. Kind of like a dupka.
Yeah. Yeah, in Ethiopia, they also do eat spaghetti. I think spaghetti in Ethiopia is better than here. It's really thick and it's natural, and there's a lot of sauce, and I like that in spaghetti. But my favorite meal is actually called injera, and it's kind of similar to mansef. So in Ethiopia, it's the same tradition. You all eat together. So you have a big plate, and there's a layer of spongy bread. It's a little sour at the bottom. And then on top of it, you put different kind of stews, you put meat, you can put cheese, and there's like eggs. I mean, whatever you want is like kind of laid out there, and you kind of eat. And in Ethiopia, you eat with your hands. So there's no forks, there are no knives or spoons. Everything you do, you eat with your hand. And if you're also at a guest house, you have to eat A lot. And you also have to accept something called a gursha, which just means that if someone picks up so like you kind of eat like this, if someone picks one up and feeds it to you, you have to take it. It's disrespectful if you don't. So if you're ever at a guest at an Ethiopian house and someone's trying to feed you, you should probably eat it because that's the tradition there. But
you should also show up with an empty stomach.
Yes.
Everything before you go.
Yeah.
That's what is the climate like in Jordan from first grade, and also you can say in Ethiopia.
What is the climate like?
Yeah.
Oh, so the climate in Jordan is very similar to North Carolina. Are all the things in North Carolina?
Most they should be.
Okay, so it's actually similar to North Carolina, and the time of the year that I was there was, I think, August to December, which is heading into the winter season, just like here we head into the winter season. However, it doesn't snow quite as much, even though in North Carolina really only snows like a week a year if we're lucky. However, it depends on which region of Jordan that you're in. So that's me talking about the cities of Jordan, such as Amman. And if you go into the desert area, then the climate can fluctuate, or the weather can fluctuate a lot, because in the evening it can be very cold, and in the daytime it would be very hot. And if you don't have a ride around the desert, then you might be a bit dehydrated and really in need of water. So
yeah. And Ethiopia, it's mainly warm weather. When I went in the summer, so I only experienced summertime weather. But one thing that I noticed is when it rains, it rains. It rains really hard, but it's actually really fast. So it'll rain and it'll feel like there's hail and you're like, oh my goodness, this is scary. And then it ends within 30 minutes, which is really fast. And then the sun comes out and you can go outside with your family. And it was never really cold when I was there. It was a kind of comfortable, cool, hot weather. So it's nice.
And are you knowledgeable of any other folk or cultural dances, whether from the countries you've been to or other countries? Have you ever tried any other dances?
I have to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if y'all remember, Ethiopia has over 80 different types of dances. And I know about 10 or 12 other kinds. They're usually kind of similar to Iskasta. That's like the main one, but there are different kinds where there's some where you're kind of moving your hips, so you're focusing on your hips. There's some where you're just moving your legs and you're kind of moving your hands as well. There's some where it's just your neck and your head. So Ethiopian dancing is a lot about isolation in some parts of your body. So Iskasta was chest isolation, but there's other isolation in other types of dances.
So I mentioned that I'm of African, Jamaican, and Chinese descent. My father is from Jamaica. So one thing that's common, I don't know if I consider this folk dance necessarily, but Jamaican dance hall, which is very much about hip isolation and gyrating. Yeah. So it's a really fun style of dance. And if you look up Jamaican dance hall, you'll find it.
Are there special clothing that they wear in Jordan or in Ethiopia, or what is like maybe traditional versus everyday clothing?
Yeah,
sure.
That's a good question.
So I can answer this one first. So in Jordan, there tends to be a very conservative style of dancing, where for the most part, men and women are supposed to dress conservatively, normally have their legs and their arms covered, and if women choose to, then they normally will also wear the scarf on their head called a hijab. But there's a lot of women who don't wear the hijab as well. It's not required. However, it's like expected if you enter into a mosque where Muslim people worship. So and the other thing is that because if you're living in the desert area, the sun can be very harsh during the daytime. They also cover themselves to protect themselves from the sun. And that's kind of the origin of why people wear those long sleeves all the time in that region.
Yeah, and same thing in Ethiopia. Usually people dress conservatively, but it's the same type of clothing you would wear here, modern types of clothing. And in terms of traditional clothing, if you noticed in the videos, they're wearing a lot of white, and the women were wearing long dresses. So that's called agar lips, which literally means country clothes. Agar means country, lips means clothes. And usually they're white. It's made out of cotton. It's handmade, so it's cool. You can go see them make it. So every dress is handmade. And it's really thick, so it can be a little hot. during the summer, but there are different types that you wear. Usually you'll see older people will wear those every day. And when you're going to church, everyone always wears it. They all wear white. But usually on an everyday, if you're going to school or if you're hanging out with friends, you're wearing kind of modern clothing that you would see here in America.
And also I should say that for kids, like for just younger kids, they tend not to have to wear long sleeves, like especially if you're running around playing soccer at school. So it's more so when you get older and you're heading to university or you're going to a school where boys and girls are sharing the same classroom, that's when they start wearing longer sleeves.
Next, how many people live in Jordan, which is 9.7 million?
Yeah, so 9.7 million people live in Jordan. 4 million live in the capital alone, and the capital is actually considered, the government wants to build a second capital city because there's so much traffic from all the people and cars in Amman, Jordan. And a lot of that traffic is coming from the amount of refugees that are now moving to Jordan from Syria, from Yemen, and from Palestine. So the country's under a lot of pressure with increasing population size, and that's why they need a lot of help from governments like the United States to be able to support all those individuals living there.
I asked about language, if they speak Swahili, so maybe you guys can say what languages are in the countries, and if you want us to teach them how to say hello or something like that.
Yeah, sure. So in Jordan, people speak Arabic, and there's the Muslim greeting, which is used as like, doesn't mean hello, but it's used in the same way as hello, where you would say Assalamu alaikum. That means peace be upon you, and wa alaikum salam means peace be upon you too. So you could say it with me, Assalamu alaikum, and then you respond wa alaikum salam. And then the easier way of saying hello, you would say ahlan. And that really just means hello. So that's one that's not related to religion. It's just literally ahlan, hello.
Yeah. And Ethiopia, like I mentioned, there are over 100 dialects, 200 dialects there. So there are a lot of different languages that are being spoken, but the main one is called Amharic. And that's what a lot of the laws are written in, and everyday language is spoken in. And in order to say hi, it also kind of is similar to Arabic. It's salam, which also means peace, and that's also an Arabic word as well. Arabic and Amharic actually are very similar. They're both Semitic languages, so they all have the same roots. So a lot of the words in both languages are really similar. But in order to say hi, you just say salam, and you can also say that when you're saying bye as well. Or you can say ciao when you're saying bye, which is similar to how Italians say bye. They're like ciao.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I should tell you how to say goodbye as well, which is ma salama, which just means with peace as well. So the greetings tend to be very much about giving good greetings and peace to one another.
Mm-hmm.
It's about schools in the two countries, how they might be similar or different.
Yeah. So the schools in Jordan really do depend on who is paying for the school and running the school. So the local schools, I should say that Jordan is historically a tribal society. So there are different tribal regions within Jordan that tend to run the schools. So a local elementary school will normally have boys and girls separated within those schools. However, if you go to an international school, which is very common, the United Kingdom, Britain hosts different schools. The US also hosts different schools that are normally in the larger cities of Jordan. Then the classes are mixed gendered starting in elementary school. When I lived in Jordan, I lived next door to an international elementary school. And every morning I was woken up by the Jordanian national anthem that celebrates the King of Jordan and his family and talks about just wishing him well and a long life. And it's something that's similar to the Pledge of Allegiance that you might do at your school. They all have the national anthem that sings to the King of Jordan.
Yeah, and school in Ethiopia is kind of similar to here. My mom always tells me stories about when she was in school. The one main difference is during specific grades, they learn different things than we do in America. So, for example, my mom knew how to build things from scratch in elementary school. They built compasses, they would go out and build houses, they would build machines, they would take them apart. By the time she was in middle school, she was learning chemistry and things you would learn later on, physics and everything. So they do learn things ahead of us. And they also learn in Amharic and in English. So they usually know 2 languages as well.
Jordan as well does Arabic and English in their
Yeah.
school.
Do you wear shoes in the house? And what are most homes like?
So one thing interesting about Jordanian homes, it depends on the family. So a more traditional conservative family does not have couches in their homes. They tend to have padding on the floor, and there's normally an open room where there's just padding like all around it, and you'll come together there to eat with one another. You do not wear shoes in the home for the most part. But then there are also more modern style homes in the cities where people have beautiful couches, some that might almost be a mix of the Western style couch with also the mix, like the same patterns as that padding is in traditional homes in Jordan. And one thing that is very distinctive about Jordanian homes is that there is always multiple family rooms to make sure that people can come together. And then it's normally just one story for the home. So in the back, there'll be the room for the children and then room for the parents. And also homes tend to be multi-generational. So in one house, there could be 4 different generations. And one thing is that the home might start with one level for that one family. And then when the son grows up and he marries, his family will then build another layer on top of the home where that family will live, and then keep building up to support all the different families in that one household.
Yeah, and same thing in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is very family oriented. So instead of building on top of each other, they build out. So when you enter a house, there'll be a big gate, and the gate opens up, and it looks like a first level school, kind of one story school. And you walk in, and you walk into a room, and then next door could be your uncle. I have 7 uncles and 2 aunts. So most of us all lived in one house together, where you would walk down the hallway, and to the right is your uncle, to the left is your second cousin. You walk forward, and there's grandma's room. So what you would have as your bedroom would kind of be your house, and then everyone comes together and has dinner together and hangs out in the family room and dances and tells stories. So it's very much where multi-generational also, where a lot of families live together, but you don't have to. Some of my uncles would move out, but they weren't that far away. They're across the street, or they're a couple of minutes over. So there's not really much spreading happening because there's a lot of family love for each other. So people don't really want to leave their families when they leave the home.
We're at time. I don't know if you guys want to answer a few more, if you have to get to your next class.
I just see a couple short questions. So Jordan is a friend of the United States. The King of Jordan was actually just in DC visiting Congress to see if the country could get more aid to help with all the refugees coming in. What about Ethiopia?
Yeah, same. Friends of Ethiopia. The African Union is located in Ethiopia, which is kind of like the United Nations, but just for African countries. And the Ethiopian Prime Minister, so they have a president and prime minister. The prime minister is the one who's mainly in charge, and he was recently here visiting with the president as well.
And then in terms of sports, I attended a lot of sports games while I was in Jordan. Specifically, soccer is the main sport that's played. They would call it Kurat al-Qadam, or football for their English.
Yeah, same. Soccer is really big, and usually a lot of the kids will make up their own sports, or make up their own games. So they'll make with soccer, they'll make plastic bags. They'll take plastic bags and water bottles and make soccer balls out of them by hand. They'll make cars with wires because they usually just pick things up around them, and then they use what they have and make what they can. But soccer is really, really big in Ethiopia.
And then I'd say the last question, how do people treat their elders? In Jordan, very much follows Islamic tradition of supporting your parents, especially because they supported you throughout your life. So when they get older, they're not working anymore, you're expected to provide for them.
Yeah, in Ethiopia, there's ultimate respect for your elders. Usually elders are served first. They're usually situated together. They still continue to live with their families. There's no nursing home. You kind of stay with your family. And the way you even greet an elder is really different from how you would greet someone who is younger, and just shows more respect and care that you have for them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for tuning in with us. I hope you learned a lot about Jordan and Ethiopia, the Debka and Ishkista, and I hope that you share it with your families and friends.
Bye.
And one quick announcement, we'll be back from 1 to 2 p.m. with our next presentation on immigration and migration in Costa Rica and Belize. That presentation is going to be more for middle school and high school students. It's a little bit more advanced, but we do have another presentation for all K-12 students from 2 to 3 p.m. and that's going to be on food and language in Japan and Spain.
Wow.
So we're going to turn off our camera, but we'll be back at 1 p.m. So thank you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.